Hi there, I'm Kevin Gentry, and welcome to the Going Big podcast, where we explore the strategies and stories behind transforming your effectiveness by 10xing your fundraising and marketing. Each week, I'll be sitting down with some of the most influential business leaders, CEOs, and nonprofit visionaries to talk about leadership, the power of giving, and how to make a real impact. If you're ready to go big and to elevate your organization to new heights, you're in the right place. You can find the Going Big podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and YouTube. And don't forget to follow us on social media and visit our website, 10x Strategies, TENX Strategies.com, for some great free resources. Let's dive in. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining today's Going Big podcast. We're going to go big today in the world of political fundraising, as well as big philanthropy. I am so pleased to have with me as my guest a longtime dear friend, the great Annie Dickerson. Many folks on this our audience know Annie, certainly by reputation, but if you know her personally, you know what a lovely person she is. Annie has been at really the highest levels of political fundraising and big dollar philanthropy, and she has such a wonderful perspective. I know that she's going to have some great tips on how you can think about going big with your fundraising and marketing. So Annie Dickerson, this is a treat. You and I got to know each other 20 years ago during George W. Bush's re-election campaign in 2004. You were on that campaign as, I think, the deputy finance director running the Rangers and Pioneers Giving Club program. And I remember when we first met, you took pity on me because I was a little shy of my goal, and you figured out a way that I could qualify at some point. But Annie, tell us, let's start with that. A presidential campaign, a giving club to really enlist a lot greater participation, including from a lot of younger donors and younger fundraisers. Tell me about thinking back 20 years ago, how you thought about that and how that is part of going big. And Annie, it's such a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, Kevin, what a delight. And it's really great, to see somebody who's such a dear friend. I guess that you've made it when you have a podcast and that there are people that actually want to listen. So, a podcaster, and it's really a delight. And I just want to say really that in order to go big, I had to go small to begin. If you can indulge me for a nanosecond, I just want to let those who might be beginning their career thinking about having their children do a career in fundraising, that I began as a volunteer on a gubernatorial race in my home state of Michigan, right? And what my job was to do was to lick stamps and apply them to, thousands of envelopes, and then seal the envelopes with a little damp cloth. Now, of course, we have machines to do all that, but the point being I never graduated to the next level. And you really show my age by saying I had to lick stamps. But I had to begin modestly, and I wasn't given the next task and able to go big and then end up doing presidential races and work for a financial mogul on Wall Street later in life. Until I started and I licked stamps well. And I did it with enthusiasm and gusto. And I was the best darn stamp licker the world ever knew. And I think that was the attitude that I always had in the beginning, is that you got to begin small to go big. Anyway, so just my little side.
Well, that's a great point
that I wanted to make.
In volunteer politics, it's open at the bottom. Anybody can get involved. And if you work hard enough and long enough and show your loyalty and dedication, you get promoted quickly. And I can see how somebody like you would get promoted quickly. So I guess you worked on the Bush campaign in 2000 in some capacity, but 4 years later, you were tapped and promoted into the upper echelons of the finance operation.
Right. So the finance chair had been an ambassador to Switzerland And I met him during the 2000 campaign when I was a consultant. And he learned that I spoke French and German. And voila, he was asked by President Bush then to go to Switzerland. He asked me to come along as his sidekick and to help him really organize the embassy. And that went well, but we were asked to come back to do Bush reelect early. So what we did is in March of 2003, which is about-ish when I met you, they asked me to be the deputy finance director. And what that meant is the role I was specifically given was to run the major donor efforts, which was to organize donors who were bundling money, putting together checks by way of events, by way of their personal one-on-one solicitation. In all the 50 states, the best donors were given to me to organize in a program we called famously Pioneers and Rangers. A little gimmicky, but it was, sometimes doing politics and developing donor programs have a little bit of a gimmick. And the idea is to get people enthralled, to get them involved, to get them to have ownership. And what I decided, we had probably, Kevin, not that you weren't extraordinarily special because you were, there were about 2,000 of these people that were supporting Bush's reelect. And it would have been impossible to manage that many. So what I decided early on, I was going to work with those with the biggest heart, who were the finest people that really cared about the process, that were unspoiled in a sense and really wanted the best in America, and who were willing to work hard. And I kind of formed this little cadre of 50 to 60 guys that I thought, men and women, that I thought I really want to get to know best, and I want to really pull the best out of. And so it was a lot of fun, really sort of taking 2,000 down to a 50, 60 person process, so that not only could we get the most out of them, but I could develop personally a little efficiency, if you will.
Well, this is really helpful. And another reason for your big success is the manner in which you work with others and build a team and a team spirit, and want to get to a number of those other examples in a minute. But maybe for the audience's benefit, in a federal race, individuals are still limited to how much they can contribute. Back in 2004, I think it was $2,000 per person. So that's a lot of money, but you have to raise a lot of those to raise the big budgets that you do. So the idea of bundlers, if I recall correctly, is you want to incentivize people who can, through their own networks, leverage themselves. And if they're each out trying to raise 50,000, 100,000, 200,000, then it's almost like selling Amway. I mean, you're building a sales operation in that way. And by the way, I wore my Pioneer cufflinks just the other night that I got as a benefit of meeting my goal.
Yeah.
But tell a little bit more about how does a group of bundlers work, and what are you really trying to do? And I think that the Mavericks program you started was a good way that you had younger donors get involved that might not otherwise have gotten involved.
Right. You know that it's really important that we really look after the next generation. So we want those that we know, if incentivized properly, if treated properly. You and I know that a lot of people in this business, fundraising in general, but particularly in the political realm, sometimes some of the fundraisers can think they're the candidate, think they're the president, think they're the principal. And the spirit of humility and generosity for the donors isn't always what it ought to be. And I think you and I have been able to be successful because one of our takeaways has always been to understand that donors can go anywhere they want. They are volunteers. And one of the ways we incentivize them to begin with is respect them, treat them well, know that they are a golden nugget and we need them more than they need us. So But we did some, we did some gimmicky things. When we had the Pioneers and Rangers, you had the right to buy a Pioneer belt buckle, or the
Louisville
you know
Slugger baseball bat.
the baseball bat, or the special lapel that said you were a Ranger and hit the amount of 100,000 that you raised. But you had to pay for it. You had to go in on the website, and now you had the right to wear the lapel pin or the belt buckle or whatever. And I think that did a couple of things. One, it raised more money for the campaign because you had to pay for it, and the campaign didn't. Okay. But you also got to wear it to the next event, where you were going to be with the President of the United States, who was again a candidate for reelect. And you got to show him, you got to signal him and all of your peers around you that you were a Ranger, because now you bestowed upon your person the lapel pin that said, I'm a Ranger.
That's a great point. So you
Saying
had
to
these,
everybody, I raised much money for you,
yeah, but you specially commissioned these things like the cufflinks or the Louisville Slugger with Bush's name on it or what have you. You weren't going to get that anywhere else, but you were given the right to purchase that once you reached the level. It wasn't a cost to the campaign, but sure, that was an element of recognition. I will tell you, Annie, I think my average donor to my effort for raising the $100,000 for Bush was probably the lowest average contribution. I mean, I asked everybody I knew, including my childhood pediatrician and my dentist and neighbors and things like that, and finally cobbled it together. But that's a great way to empower others to become part of the political system. You think about these well-heeled donors, and God bless them, and they're a key to the success in philanthropy and political action. But it's a great way to empower others as well. But you hit on something else that's really important, and that is, and this is like another key to your success, is you've always been focused on the long term. And there's a risk, I think you'd agree, in political fundraising to slip into transactional mode and to really kind of like focus on the immediate and try to squeeze everything out you can. But you've always stayed focused on the long term and those long-term relationships, which after the Bush campaign, I remember the Giuliani campaign, the Romney campaign, all these campaigns were vying to get you to become their next national finance chairman. But instead, one of the donors that you'd worked with, who really admired you, much like Ambassador Mercer Reynolds admired you from the previous campaign, a titan of Wall Street, a real mogul, asked you to come build a philanthropy program for him. Talk a little bit about that and how you think those consequences play into our audience who's thinking about how they can go big.
Yeah, I agree with you on an earlier point, and then I want to go to the Wall Street experience that I was really privileged to get to go into. That really, like you and I both believe that life is about relationships. And if you're going to be in the fundraising business, it's a sales job in a sense, but it's more than that. It's about building relationships. It's about getting others to buy in, to get excited, to motivate them so that then they're selling. They've got skin in the game as well. And if you don't want to be somebody who really wants to build deeply relationships and actually ask people what they care about and only go to them about things they care about, you ought not be a fundraiser. Because the essential ingredient is that you're a relationship builder, that you really care, and that we don't wear everybody out with everything, and that we're not transactional. We're willing to turn somebody away and not ask them for a nickel when it's not the right fit, right? So after I'd been in politics a while and gotten to do some pretty cool things, worked for a couple of presidents, had been honored to be competed with on a couple of different races that both wanted me to be their director. After that, I was able to go to work for essentially one of the guys who was the finance chair of the race. he invited me to come and be the director of his family office in New York City, and to really oversee his philanthropy, how he gave away hundreds of millions of dollars, and also his policy work and his ongoing political engagement, because he cared a lot about the outcome of the country and wanted that to be one of the legs of the stool. So I had a really chance to go to work for him, and it was really a very interesting experience. Again, we had to start small to go big. He really wanted to have me not only engage in the work that he knew we wanted done, but to really help him shape mission, to shape direction, and as I call it today, ultimately legacy. Because if you do this business well, you're helping somebody to find their sweet spot, to not be like everybody else, but how do I spend out money that's efficient, that has metrics, that really grows, but that ultimately delivers results, that is game changing, whether it's in some charitable pursuit. The Gates Foundation does all their work in Africa to make sure that kids don't get malaria and polio. Resolvable. You need shots. You need vaccines. And so there are some foundations that do that, some that do water. And we wanted to find some of the sweet spots of my philanthropist. So we took time in really working through that, built a great mission, built then a plan of action, how to go about developing the mission, and how to make a difference, and how to do things that are game changers. What we're talking about, Kevin, is really high impact. How does somebody who may not have a lot of money, but somebody who does certainly, how do we help them get the highest impact possible to change the world for the better, to really be a game changer? And it's so exciting when you can be involved in that kind of work. And ultimately, they might not care about that, but I'm in the back of my mind, we're doing something so important here that it'll be additive to how they're remembered ultimately. And that's something that I care about.
That's extraordinary. So this prompts a lot of questions, and this is amazing. So first of all, there's the immediate direct impact, hundreds of millions of dollars now from this particular philanthropist in the role that you helped to put together in terms of understanding the mission and the impact and vetting organizations and making recommendations, because obviously you wanted to get the best bang for the buck from every one of those charitable dollars. So that's great. And that prompts some questions I want to come back to in a moment about how fundraisers who are listening should think about this from their perspective through the eyes of your perspective. But you also, in this role, help this philanthropist raise money from other generous philanthropists and effectively leveraging his support and his relationships to increase the impact even further of his giving, be it political, public policy, charitable causes, what have you. And so that comes back to this point about building relationships and trust. So you never stopped. You never stopped with the relationships and said, okay, I've got this new role. I didn't need to do that anymore. How did you continue to think about this as you kept building?
Yeah, it wasn't easy in the beginning, because where you and I are outgoing, and I have this, really supercharged energy that must be constantly expended. My philanthropist didn't in the beginning. He was a modest guy, a modest man about his wealth, and he was not a necessarily outgoing individual. And so I really had to work with him to, he wanted to make sure he wasn't the only one doing the kind of work he was doing. And when he was wanting to do political work, for example, he wanted to know he wasn't alone out there. So he wanted to start leveraging it. And so we needed to start going to people to say, let's work together because we can do big things, have supercharged, super high impact if we work together. Imagine what 110 people or 100 people who cared about X, Y, or Z can do together. And so to do that, we had to get him out of himself a bit. So I started taking him to events. I started introducing him to people that you and I had worked with in the Pioneer and Ranger campaign efforts. And when I was active, when I was doing President Bush's race, people from around the country I began to introduce him to. And ultimately, what we decided to do is form a group of donors who could collaborate, right? Shared interests in politics and policy. So what we formed is what has become the foremost group of philanthropists and policy and political people on the center right who now collaborate and work together. And we just had meetings recently, and we had over 150 there who were much like my philanthropist and my donor, who cares deeply about sharing values and work together so that their impact, instead of being here, can be here, here, and here. They want to make a difference. They want to bring about change. And so doing that sometimes means getting the best out of not only an individual, but having the individual help get the best out of other individuals. That pyramiding thing you talked about earlier.
Well, this is, I mean, but you're really hitting on some important things, and they're not easy, but they are fairly simple in that, you know, you start with a foundation of integrity, trust, building relationships in a way that are true win-win. You're obviously dealing honestly with people. And then when you have that shared vision and shared values, great collaborations can occur. But
Right.
a term that keeps coming back is leverage. It's not just what you did. So with the Bush Pioneers and Rangers program, you were leveraging the relationships and networks of 2,000 generous donors, which had this force multiplier effect. When you went to work for this very, very generous philanthropist, who I might add has had extraordinarily consequential and meaningful efforts in this country and outside of the United States, it's amazing all the great that he's been able to achieve. You were leveraging that not only by improving the effectiveness of the direct giving, but the indirect giving through this collaboration again with people who had shared values, shared vision, and then I mean, so and then all along you're continuing through your own efforts to build trust and build relationships. So I want to take it up to the last point. There's so many parts of your biography, we would be here all day. But the other one is I worked with you again most recently this spring when you were the national finance chairman for Nikki Haley's very impressive run for president. Obviously, she came up short in the nomination, but she was the last. Not only she was the last woman standing, she was the last person standing. Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. And you had some other very innovative approaches to leveraging her from the standpoint of shared vision, shared values. Could you talk a little bit about some of the special groups, networks, efforts
Mhm.
that you undertook? You'll raised a
Yeah.
lot of money.
Yeah. And Kevin, that in politics, it's obviously not all just doing great and raising money. It's just one of the important legs of the stool in politics. You have to have a lot. You have to have advisors. And the first thing we did is what? We formed an executive steering committee of key donors that we met with every week by Zoom. And because you and I have found that it's not just leveraging financial engagement, but it's leveraging ideas. And when you have donors that are very successful, they're centimillionaires, they're billionaires, they've done big things, we need their brain trust as much as we need their money, right? We need their entrepreneurialism. We need their innovative ideas. because when you do these presidential campaigns, they're nationwide, they're 50 states. It's such a massive operation done with so few people because you don't have endless money to spend on building a staff everywhere. So you have to really, you have to channel your resources, and shepherd them properly. So we found it really, really important that we grab this brain trust to let us know how they built their businesses, because that's what we're doing. We're building, when you're in a presidential race, you're building up a big business very fast. And you've got a year and a half to make your case and to go to profit. Profit in this case means winning. So you do need money, but you really need their innovation and their entrepreneurial spirit. I remember one of the executive committee members who shaped and built a really big, well-known business in America, who was a billionaire, and a product that a lot of us use every day. And he was giving us great ideas as to messaging, etc. So I thought that group and that executive committee was very important, and we were talking to them every week. I also built up, because my experience in caring about helping more women get elected, I formed an organization years ago called Winning for Women. And it's an organization to help center-right women get elected, to grow the tent on the right, and to get more women elected. And we've been able to do that. So with that experience, I formed Women for Nikki, and that was a nationwide organization, women who were supporting us in all 50 states. And we did calls with them every other week. And then as we got nearer to be in their home state, and it was time for a primary in their state, we would then really do more weeklies and get them engaged. But again, we were able to build the overall presidential effort of Nikki's by building and getting excited Women for Nikki, because obviously that was going to be a really important coalition group for a woman that we were hoping would be our first woman president. But anyways, we built to be a big organization. So look at building coalitions, building groups, again, to engage more people who could engage more people and who they could engage more. So it's really building the momentum and getting the snowball, building and building until you have, a monster boulder. That's what you hope to create. And you want to get smart people, whether it's in every state or in your core executive group. Think of them as board of directors, people that are really smart in your business, who understand, who want to provide an inflection points and ideas that help you to be innovative, because you can't do these big things alone. You just need smart people who might have been there and done it in different ways and in different businesses to help you grow.
All right. So this is, again, really helpful. The subject is going big. And so, yes, you've got to do relationship development, cultivation. You got to be focused on the long term. Trust is such an important component of this. But what you're also saying is, in order to go big, first, you've got to think of leverage and building networks. But what you're also saying is you've got to lean into true engagement and be willing to ask for and take on board ideas from others. That's tough for a lot of groups and people. There tends to be a little bit more top down and kind of like,
Oh, yes.
I want your contribution, but I really don't want your ideas. Comment on that and tell us a little bit more about why you believe in it so much.
Yeah, I'm laughing only because in politics, especially, I think charitable organizations, if I'm being honest, do a better job of cultivating over time, and not just when they're asking. But so often in politics, you're on a deadline, right? The campaign is moving closer to that one election day, which is for all the marbles. And so they're constantly asking you to do more and more and more, go out and raise more, do events for us, host more activities for us, give us more money. And they're not taking the time to really build out those relationships. So in politics, it's so fast moving and there's such a quick end date, right, for everything that they forget some of those important action steps of taking time, breathing, going to people, not over abusing these really great donors, especially at your core. You want them to survive. You've got to listen to them. And it's really hard in politics when they're moving at that fast pace and they're under so much pressure to deliver. And by the way, in fundraising, one of the reasons people like to go into fundraising, because every week how you're doing. You're measured all the time. And I feel bad for the people on the political side in fundraising, where they've got one day where they're judged. You get a win or you get the loss, right? And that's
a great point. That's a great point. You are definitely judged.
They're running for 2 years, they're running for 4 years, but they've got only one day where it matters for them. Not so in fundraising.
What do they say? What gets
You're judged every day, every week. Did we hit our goal this week? So we're measured all the way along, and I love that because we got a constant measuring rod, and we're really able to go at it. But even when you're in a political campaign, right? It's important to stop and breathe with your donors and to appreciate them and to listen to them and solicit their ideas. And when they have ideas, moreover, for the candidate, which they always do, should she think about doing this more or he think about doing that more? And I really liked the speech that she gave, but could she think of, and I myself have done it because I've become a donor over the years, and I've also always have ideas, and I've been around it so much that I've actually written speeches for Nikki, of which she's taken some pieces some days and none the other, right? But it's important to have a mechanism to feed the ideas to the candidate or to the board, in the case of a charity, to the president of the charity. You've got to have a path and a way for your donors, and it's usually the finance director or the development director needs to have a way to feed up ideas and needs to know what ideas are consequential or could even be game-changing. So you have to have mechanisms for those best ideas to be fed up. Well, even when you're rushed in politics.
Right. Well, you also hit on something, what gets counted gets measured, and the fundraiser's measuring stick is a constant piece out there. You know what kind of progress you're making, and appreciate the point about deadlines as well. Well, Annie, taking all of this lifetime and a professional career of political and nonprofit fundraising, development, relationship cultivation, what is the biggest mistake you believe that donors make in their giving?
That is a very good question. I think that sometimes a donor doesn't know where they want to go, where they want to be ultimately. So knowing where to go to get them there. I always think it's really important particularly when you're working with philanthropists, donors that are wanting to give a lot of money away, wanting to be consequential, wanting to be game-changing, wanting to make a difference, that it's really important to start backwards, Kevin. As you know, you start backwards to say, where do you want to be? What change do you want to make? Where do you want the world to be? Or how do you want to really make a difference? And then work backwards. So I think if you're only working from here and seeing where you might end up, I think it's ultimately a mistake, because then you end up giving money away that is not going to be meaningful. It's not going to have the kind of impact you want, and you'll make a lot of mistakes. And one of the when I was first helping the philanthropist whose family office I ran on Wall Street for many years, one of the things I did when I was first meeting with him is, where have you given and what if these things were meaningful to you, to help to try to find their ultimate mission statement? And I found this, that they were giving to the Tourette Syndrome Association. And I said, now that's really interesting. Is there a family member who has Tourette's or whatever? And he says, no, my friend so-and-so is on the board. And I said, your friend died recently, and do you want to continue to give? And he said, no, indeed, I was only giving that as a friend's gift. So really separating friends' gifts. We always had a pool of money for friends' gifts, friends that are on boards, or friends that are being honored at a big gala event. Always put them on. You want to look after friends. That's what you do, right? And especially if you want to leverage them later, you gotta have a little bucket to give to friends. But if you want to change the game, work backwards. Where do I want to be so that I can get there and be laser focused, due north, that everything I do is helping me, at least for the most part, get to that goal. If I want water wells in every major village in Africa, I need to make sure that at least me or my team wake up every day thinking, how do I get more water wells built so that there could be running water in all the villages in Africa? That's your aim, right? You just want to make sure that you and your team are spending most of your time getting to that end game. That's where I think a lot of them make a mistake.
That's great. Well, as Lewis Carroll said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there, as he talked about in Alice in Wonderland. That's terrific. You've got to know, what does success look like? What is your objective? What are you trying to accomplish? And then, of course, that gives a much greater sense of meaning and purpose if you're able to make achievements toward getting to the root causes of that problem or advancing these principles or what have you. That's great. What a great, great insight. All right. So I'm going to put you on the spot again. What's the biggest mistake that fundraisers make?
I think it's always been clear to me that two things. One, they think they're principles. They believe that they are the cause, right? And they get a little ahead of themselves, particularly in political fundraising. If you're working for a president's reelect and you're working for the president of the United States, I've noticed that some of them come to think that they're the president, and that the way they actually relate to donors is very, shall we say, less than desirable. And I have always found that it's really important when you are a fundraiser and you're working for a worthy cause, whether it's a president's reelect or for a charity that is big and important, is going to be finding the cure for cancer, right? That you come from a spirit of humility, that we're blessed to be able to work for this great cause or this great person, and that we are given a gift, and we are very dismissible, that we have to be strong, worthy, and competent, and that we have to have a spirit of humility, that after all, it is not about us. It is about the cause. It is about the candidate, and we want to serve them well. And we want to serve them not only well in our job, but we want to serve them well in our life, because I don't have the freedom of working for a president of the United States or a candidate running for president and get drunk at the nearby bar in my free time, right? I want to conduct myself, and I want my teams to conduct themselves in a way that is worthy of the task we have in life, to be the finest person we can be, and a humble person knowing that we're here to serve. And we want to have that service be worthy of the people we're serving. So I always think we all want to conduct ourselves in a way that is fine and worthy and upright, so that we can be the best person and people we can be, so that our cause is well served. That's what I think.
Hear, hear. All right. Well, this is phenomenal and great inspiration and guidance for all of us. Final question, Annie. You've spanned your professional adult life through all of these extraordinary efforts, campaigns, projects, initiatives. What advice, and I know you, and not only have you done a superb job, a remarkable job, you're greatly admired, you're greatly appreciated. I certainly admire and appreciate all the good stuff that you've done. You've had a lot of fun along the way as well. What counsel would you give to aspiring fundraisers who are listening to this podcast today? Start licking stamps, addressing envelopes. What advice would you give looking back that might motivate and inspire and give us some even greater advice to send us off on?
Um, that's a bigger task than you know, and it's a great question. And I say yes, be willing to begin at the beginning. My first job I was making after I licked stamps and then was elevated to an assistant finance director to the assistant, right? I mean, that's kind of how we all began. And I was making $12,000, which to me was like, wow, this is great, you know. It also says how old we are. Be willing to do small things. And a lot of people coming out of college right now want to, you know, they think they need to begin with $80,000 or $100,000. It's okay. Begin at 40 or 50. It will be temporary. Trust me, but do it well. Do it with all your gusto. Put your heart behind it, and be people oriented. You're always right when you're serving others and you're liking others. And, you know, I use the word loving others. When you're a lovely, loving person, you know, you cannot be in fundraising and not like people. I frankly went into fundraising by accident, and I wasn't really great. We're not exactly the calculus students. You know, they're like, okay, you're not going to be an accountant here, Annie. So maybe you need to find a path that is more reflective of your personality. If you love people and you want to love on people and you want to make a difference, fundraising could be your next step. But be willing to begin in the beginning, to start small and to build big, but do things small. When you do things small, you'll be given things that are a little bit bigger. And when you're trusted with that and you do that well, but you'll be able to go big when you do all the small things in a big way. And that's what I would recommend. So be willing to be humble about that and start small. Be willing to settle for the job that makes you a little just to get you to the next step. And then go big when your moment arises. And trust me, it will, as long as you did the little things well.
Well, that's great advice for us in any realm of life, not to mention for nonprofit or political fundraising. Annie Dickerson, we can easily see how you've been so successful and how you are so beloved. Thank you for the energy that you bring to these efforts and the positive attitude and all that you've been able to achieve. And thanks for joining us on this Going Big podcast. I hope it's an encouragement to all of our listeners to think about how they can go big, because after all, we owe it to our cause. We owe it to the very people we're trying to help by figuring out how we can go big in a more consequential and meaningful way. All right. Thanks a lot again. Great to have you. All the very best.
Thank you.